So, 2 weeks in a row, we're bringing you a bonus episode
Yep.
that is not about a horror movie. And right now, with everything on lockdown and people not able to go outside, people have a lot of time on their hands and are looking for things to watch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We watch a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for suggestions, number one is Mother from 2017. And
Yeah, highly recommend it.
we'll post an episode reviewing that on Monday. Yeah. But in the meantime, if you've got some spare time, we were thinking like what would be an interesting theme of things to talk about or recommend. And having just watched Hereditary, which sort of revolves around a cult that's trying to bring this demon king Paimon into the physical world, we thought cults would be a relevant topic. And as it happens, my wife is wildly obsessed with cults. And so we end up watching a lot of documentaries about them. And I have a list of 6 that I think people would enjoy. And I'm curious if you have seen these or are familiar with the subject, like the cult that it's about. Because most of your like documentaries and stuff are more like either weird,
trashy
families. Yeah, like it's kind of a little bit different. Yeah. And so I'm curious if you would be interested in any of these.
Yeah.
But number 1 on the list is Wild Wild Country, which is, I believe, a Netflix original documentary series. And so it's several episodes. And it's about this cult that moves out into a town in Oregon, and they just like build a new society there. They just like buy up the land and like build their own compound or city or whatever. And so then that leads to a lot of conflict with like the people around them. And so you have the people that are like in the cult that believe it, but then you have like the crazy leader who is becoming less and less attached to reality. And then all of the conflict with the area around them, and then the government and everything else. And it's really crazy and wild, and it's a lot of interesting information just from thinking about all the different aspects of how this could just happen. Like enough people wanted to make this happen that it just did. And then the reactions of people around them and stuff were interesting as well. So
yeah, I've heard about the documentary Wild Wild Country, but I hadn't watched this before. It seems pretty intense.
Yes.
After reading about it, when you sent me the list, I was reading about it. I was like, damn, that's pretty crazy stuff. But I hadn't watched it.
Yeah, and they're I don't know how to say it. They call it, so their leader was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. I haven't watched it in a while, so I don't remember the pronunciation. But this one, it was really just kind of like a one-off. It was just like this guy, and then he got enough people together that they could, do that. So it's really...
It was in the 70s, was it?
I think so.
It makes sense. It looks like he died in 1990, so...
Yeah, I think they moved out there. Okay, so the community that they built was from 1981 to 1988.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So that's,
that makes sense because they were talking about the AIDS epidemic.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, this isn't like this distant thing. It was fairly recent history.
And it's done by the Duplass
Oh, yes. Yeah.
brothers.
Yeah, no, it's a super well-made one. So that's a good one to watch. So the second one on my list is called Jonestown, The Life and Death of People's Temple. And this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. It's about Jim Jones, who started off almost as like almost like a televangelist type personality. I mean, he really, in the early days, he did not strike me as terribly different from some of the people that we saw come through the church that we grew up in when we were kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like kind of that personality. And a lot of the stuff he was saying really wasn't like super far out there as far as just, sort of more fundamentalist Christianity type stuff. And so they put together this church called the People's Temple, and it grew over time. And he was getting in trouble in the U.S. So, and also losing his mind. I mean, getting crazier and crazier as time went on. Long story short, he ends up leading over 900 people to create a new settlement in South America called Jonestown. And then it started being investigated because, like, the families of the people who were there are like, this, something's off. Like, my relative would not be doing this if they were in complete control of their own mind. Like, something is weird and wrong here. And so it actually was investigated by, like, a senator. And, the famous phrase, like, don't drink the Kool-Aid. That's where this came from. And so it was this huge, just like, building insanity that these people were in. And it has interviews with a lot of those people, and also like family members. But you hear about like kids being there and like being born into that society, and like that's all they've known, and they think that it's normal. And just it's insane and it's scary. And like, again, I think you end up really feeling bad for the kids, but it's just such an interesting story, and to see the way that it grows and changes over time, and how it goes from, what seemed like just kind of a progressive, treat people well sort of church movement, to this like South American compound with mass suicide, is wild to me. So
that's insane. Yeah, died from apparent cyanide poisoning.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. So number 3 on the list is a little bit lighter, and I don't know why I say it that way because it's still bad, but it's called Going Clear, and it is about Scientology. And so this is a 2015 HBO documentary. So the production value and everything is great. I mean, it's really, really well made. It's the editing, just everything about it is good, and it's interesting. It gives you a lot of the background of Scientology, but also just sort of a lot of the corruption and other things that are going along with it. And, obviously impacts some celebrities and things, and it's a good watch, and it's really interesting. And what's crazy, especially like thinking about this in relation to some of the other ones on this list, is like, this is happening now.
You're right.
Like, this isn't like a thing that happened in the 80s or a thing that happened before that we look back on and we're like, wow, that was crazy. How did that happen to people? It's like, no, like, famous people now are part of this.
Right.
And it's powerful, and it has a lot of money behind it. And obviously, like, plenty of people in the government are allowing it to happen, and it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, when it comes to Scientology, it blows my mind. Like, anytime I hear a story, it's like, that makes sense, but also like, it just completely blows my mind. But I don't want them to come after me, so I'm not going to say anything bad.
Yeah. So the next one on the list is called Holy Hell. This was, I think CNN made it, but it's about the Buddha Field cult. And that's another one. I haven't seen this one in a while. I just remember it being one that I liked. It reminded me a lot of Wild Wild Country. In that just you kind of had some similar elements where you just had this one guy who was like the guru that knew everything, and all these people were almost like obsessed with him.
Yeah.
But of course, there was all kinds of sexual abuse and other stuff going on, like these weird power dynamics, and just a really not good situation for anybody.
Why is it like what? Why do you think that? Now, I'm not asking because I'm going to do it or anything, but how do these people get a following?
Right? Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. And there's a Netflix show called Explained that just picks like a random subject and then goes super in depth on it for like 25 minutes. And they have an episode on cults that sort of explain like what the key elements are and how they form. That gets into that a little bit, and I won't try to like explain the way it does, but it's interesting because there is like a definite progression that has to be followed, and then what it all sort of ends up with is like this feeling of social pressure, to where it's not like you feel indebted to this one person, but you feel part of this community that all won't question that person. And so it's I
just gotta figure out how to start one. Yeah.
The next one I had on the list is called Waco, The Rules of Engagement. And this is an older documentary, and so production-wise it's not as good, but the story is very fascinating. And that's about the Waco siege, where the Branch Davidian Church, it was basically a standoff between the government and this cult. And it goes into, sort of what the people who were there believed and what they were thinking through all of it, but also just the, again, the kids that are caught in the middle of all this that don't really understand what's going on. And this is one that like escalated and ended up with a bunch of people dead, unfortunately,
because of standoff with the cops.
I can't remember. I need to go back and rewatch this, but there was a fire started at one point, and I can't remember who started the fire to make that happen.
Ryan started the fire.
Yeah. Okay. So, the main guy is David Koresh, and what it says on Wikipedia is, during the attack, a fire engulfed Mount Carmel Center. So things are still like debated as to who did what and how things went down exactly. But it was an FBI siege, and they had tried to use tear gas to get people out. Somehow a fire started, and then 76 people, including 20 children, 2 pregnant women, and David Koresh, the leader, all died in the fire. So,
jeez.
Yeah. And then the last one on my list is, I actually debated putting this one on here because I feel weird about it, but it's called Prophets Pray, and it is about the FLDS Church, which is the Fundamental Latter-day Saints. So you had like, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, and they settled in Utah, and then when polygamy was outlawed, I guess some branches like broke away from the main church because they're like, no, that's fundamental, it has to happen. So this is the really like over the top one that lives in Colorado City, Utah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, Sarah and I drove by that a couple months ago when we went on our hiking trip. And so they have this city, and basically they just run the city. And it's
what's the city again?
Colorado City is the name of it.
Oh, okay. Original.
Yeah, right. But it's like polygamy still just goes on there, and these people all have like multiple wives and lots of kids, but it's really like creepily focused on their leader, who is Warren Jeffs. And where I get into hesitation to recommend this documentary is just that you find out about a lot of his abuse, and a lot of it is towards kids. And I don't like thinking about or hearing about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it gets, pretty graphic in some parts. But the big takeaway is just, you've got this guy who his dad was the leader, and then his dad died and he sort of ascended, and has this whole community of people convinced that he is the prophet who is basically like God's manifestation on earth. And he has complete control over their finances, over who they marry, over how they spend their time, over how long their kids can go to school. I mean, like this one person in the center. And throughout the documentary, they play recordings of him talking. And it's just the weirdest, like, monotone, like, hypnotic type.
Psychopath.
Yeah, it's so weird. And then so he's actually in jail now.
Yeah.
And so they've talked to some of the people that work at the prison, and they're like, yeah, you can watch him on the camera. He'll just go stand in front of the mirror for 45 minutes at a time and not move.
What?
And like, the dude is absolutely off his rocker insane. And that was the thing that to me made this kind of interesting, because I think that with some of the others, the cult leader knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that the guy in the Buddhafield cult, the one from Holy Hell,
yeah,
like, I think he knew what he was being manipulative. He wanted to have the following. He wanted to be a cult leader. He wanted to manipulate people. And I think that Charles Manson was very similar in that, like, yeah, he was unbalanced, but he also knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to get people to follow him and support him. He wanted to use that to then launch his music career. Like, he had all these... He was very manipulative of people and putting on, like, a personality to be able to control them. Yeah. I think that Warren Jeffs actually believes he's the prophet. I think that he is completely and totally insane. I think he thinks he's talking to Mormon God, like, all the time. And I think that he believes he's fully justified in all this, like, terrible stuff that he's done. And that's so crazy to me because, I mean, like, millions of dollars are being funneled to this guy, and he's gotten away with so much. And they followed around. So after things were kind of getting hot with the investigation in Utah, he started traveling around and starting construction on these other compounds, like, all over the country. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just massive amounts of land and construction, and just the amount of money that is being funneled through that organization, and how much that's allowed them to get away with, when the guy at the top is just insane. It's so crazy to me, and it's so disturbing. And so, yeah, that's why that one's on the list.
It says here that Warren Jeffs had as many as 87 spouses.
Yeah. And in the documentary, they would show, like, his wives or former wives, and it would say, like, Warren Jeffs' wife number 62 or something. Like, that's how they, like, identified the people. It's crazy.
That's, yeah. Was the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ the people who moved down to Mexico?
I don't know. I didn't hear anything about Mexico.
What's that Mormon presidential guy that ran?
Mitt Romney?
Yeah. It's like his dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Something with his dad they lived in or currently live in, like, Mexico, and, like, at a compound kind of like that where it was, like, guarded by guns and stuff like that. And apparently they're battling it out with cartel now. Like, that's a recent thing. Gosh. And I think at one time we're asking for basically, like, protection from the United States. The United States, at least last I heard, was like, no, man, like, you guys chose to live down there.
Yeah, right.
Or that you chose, that's, your so they refused to help. Now that probably will change, but it's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah. Well,
I wonder if there's one on the one in Topeka, what's that really aggressive one?
Westboro Baptist Church.
Westboro Baptist, yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
And scary, but
it also reminds me, like, of the horror movie. Some of these that you're talking about, the movie Red State.
I haven't seen it.
I don't know if we watched it. It's, I definitely recommend it. It's it was actually written and directed by Kevin Smith, who did, like, Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah.
But it's very similar cult, Westboro Baptist Church, like, the idea, I guess, kind of, and it just goes, like, super aggressive, and it's pretty crazy. I recommend watching it.
Nice.
Yeah,
we'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
and one thing that stood out to me too in going back through these and looking at this list is that, for the most part, cults in real life are, you have this, like, dynamic figure in the middle who exerts power over a group of people. They create this, like, sense of community, and then the person at the top, like, the whole structure of that group or society is around that person being above question, and then they give in to all of their worst instincts, they feel like they are truly unstoppable. They have no restraint, and then they abuse people, and they do a lot of terrible stuff. And then what I think tends to happen is they live in that world all the time, and then they just assume that the rest of the world will treat them the same way, and then they do even crazier stuff, because they're just so disconnected from reality. But what's interesting to me is that in horror movies, that's never what a cult is. In horror movies, a cult is always like a group of Satanists or a group of witches or like, this group of people who were trying to accomplish some type of like thing to bring in like a dark presence or something. And so it was just really interesting because thinking about the cult in Hereditary, it's almost like a totally different type of thing than any of the cults in these documentaries.
Yeah. That's why I'm mentioning that red state, because it's kind of like that in a way. At least a real closed off group. But yeah, it's insane, man. And the crazy thing is like you can definitely like see it as far as like you can see how things like this could happen. Like people who are down, I'm not saying this happens with all of them, but if you're down on your luck and you have some sort of something that can give you hope, some people are willing to do whatever it takes to if they're in the wrong mindset. But it's also kind of crazy to think about, like I've heard this said on multiple podcasts before and just like reading about it, but it seems like no one is really supposed to be like that famous. You know what I mean? Like how unnatural is it to think of like someone, for example, let's say like Elvis Presley or like the Beatles, like that's like an insane amount of like people love them, and just thinking of like the power that they have if you have millions of fans worldwide is just kind of crazy to think about. Like you could really become messed up thinking that you can get away with whatever you want. And honestly, I'm sure some of these really big celebrities, I'm sure they killed some people. Just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Do you have any specific ones in mind?
Yeah, I got a crap ton of them. John Travolta, he's killed someone. No. But I mean, it's just like these people, if you think about it, like if you were being told every day, you're doing good, this is great, like this, if you're being told that every day, then obviously like it's going to change your head, just like it would change your head if you get in the exact opposite, like you're worthless, or you're a piece of shit. You might not believe it at first, but if it keeps going on and on and on,
Yeah, well, and I've kind of had a similar thought about Mike Bloomberg. Like, why did he think he could run for president?
Right.
Like, where did that idea even come from? And when he threw it out there, because it's not like he just one night woke up and made a Facebook page. He's like, "Hey, I'm running for president." Like, no, he's paying a bunch of people a bunch of money to help him do that. And why? When everybody's on your payroll, nobody's going to be like, dude, that's a dumb idea, because everybody wants to keep making the money. But it's just like, I don't know, that had to be.
It seems like the same concept right there.
Yeah. Because
can't be wrong.
You have the power and money, and everybody around you wants access to that power and money. So why would they ever have any motivation to be honest with you? And it's a weird thing. You talking about maybe people just shouldn't be that famous. I kind of wonder if it's like winning the lottery, where if you look at all the statistics, a few people who win the lottery do something smart with it and end up better off in the future. But most people who win the lottery are in a worse financial situation 5 years later, than before it ever happened. And so I kind of wonder if humans just aren't wired for some things. Yeah,
that's probably true, man. It's probably very true. But yeah, that's crazy. I think what I'm going to do, though, is, so this is my last day of vacation.
Yeah.
My last day. I got to go to bed early tonight. And I think what I'm going to do, though, is I want to watch Prophets Pray. That was the one that interested me the most out of the ones you were talking about.
All right. I'll be interested to hear what you think of it.
Thinking about joining is where I'm getting at. Colorado City.
Yes.
Colorado Town. What was it?
Colorado City. And
I like the simplicity of it.
Yeah. And so every place that they have property is just beautiful. Colorado City is right there in the landscape. You're going to see it and you're going to be amazed and you're going to think, oh, it wouldn't be so bad. And when we drove by it,
you're selling me on it, by the way.
When we drove by it on the highway, and it's this little town kind of nestled there against the mountains, and I asked Sarah if we could stop and go shopping, and she did not think that was funny at all.
God, that'd be crazy.
Yeah. But anyway, until next time, we will be back on Monday with our review of Mother.